Well, we were debating whether or not change is possible, especially in the whole field of wellness and well-being and sense of self or whatnot. Everyone is trying to change or themselves somehow. And if today's understanding of change is a healthy or appropriate one or not.
So what is change? I think the most important thing is to define what we expect when we say,
change.
I want to change.
Yeah.
What do we expect exactly?
I think people look at themselves or the way they've been behaving lately, and they'll see characteristics that they dislike or problems that are arising, and they either try to negate these problems.
Can we name a few so that the people listen?
Maybe I'm angry and I'm very volatile, so I want to change the way I react all the time. So I want to negate that anger. Or maybe I'm not as spontaneous as I think I need to be, so I try to change my daily habits or weekly habits to include one spontaneous activity. Or maybe I'm not as fit as I want or think I need to be, so I change my daily routine and exercise in the morning for 30 minutes.
How long does that last?
Not long. Not long at all.
No, it doesn't last long because we are treating the symptoms.
Yeah.
Right? We are not going to the root of something that has become a problem, because something becomes a problem. Your personality traits are not a problem to begin with.
Right, okay.
Okay? So we talk about our personality, our character in terms of strengths and weaknesses, which is something I dislike very much, because they are all our tools for doing things. You know, it's how we understand the world around us, how we feel, how we behave, how we make our choices, everything, how we experience the world, everything depends on who we are. So the most important thing is to understand who we are, the whole package. You know, even those things that we think are weaknesses, they are not necessarily weaknesses. They are different colors, they're different hues, they're different aspects of who we are, because we are multifaceted, we are complex as personalities and people. And unfortunately, when we address our problems in this way, we take something that's quite beautiful in its complexity and we turn it into something that's very linear, and in fact we objectify it. You know, here's me and here's the problem.
Right.
But the problem, that which becomes anger, which might be the experienced problem, is a symptom of something else that is underlying that specific emotion. So unless you go to the source of the problem, as in everything else, unless you find the cause, you will never resolve your anger.
Right. So it's not a matter of changing me, but understanding me.
Yes, you have to understand you. Now, our personality traits, as I said, is, you know, how we deal with the world around us. They have different expressions. For example, anger. If we take anger, for example, what causes anger? Possible, because there's thousands of things, right? There's thousands of things that can cause. Now, when something becomes a problem, it usually becomes a problem because we have not understood who we are. We have not learned how to respond to situations. So there's frustration and frustration and frustration, which builds up, and eventually at every little signal that you get, whoosh, you know, you get angry, and it also becomes a way of responding to situations. So it's a learned behavior.
Right.
In response to something that we haven't yet understood. As long as we understand the cause of our anger and we learn a new behavior, the problem is solved. Otherwise, it's not solved. No matter what strategies, techniques, whatever you use, you may see an effect for a short period of time, but then you will switch back, which is natural. You will switch back to yourself, you know?
This might be a dumb question, but how does someone even go about understanding themselves or understanding the personality trait that they deem needs to be changed?
Oh, I love this. Through the experience of living.
Okay.
The experience of living, not life, is how you learn everything that has to do with yourself. Okay? And why is that? Because living, we participate, we do things, we think about the things, we interpret, we interact, we relate, we do a lot of things. So this is the experience of living, not life.
As a noun.
As a noun,
But
which
the
is
verb.
again objectified, but the verb, because life is lived. Okay? Now, this experience, it's the field where we learn everything. It's where we will succeed and fail. It's where we will feel sad and happy, disappointed and thrilled. It's where everything happens, and we gain a lot of information about who we are, because our feelings, when we feel angry, for example, is a result of something that happened to us and got us frustrated and mad. So if you sit, you think, right? You have to think, explore what was it that got you angry, and what would be the best way to not address your anger, but think of the situation and what caused within the situation your feeling. If I can express it in a different way so we understand. The experience of living is an interaction, right? It's a process whereby it's you and the others. In order to cover your needs, you expect sometimes things of others. You need to cover your needs, but so does the other person. The others also need to cover their needs. So when you find yourself in a situation, it's people trying to cover their needs, right? So it's very important, first of all, to understand your needs, which depend on your personality, your character. Okay, that's where they come from. So it's very important first to understand your needs. Then you are in a situation, you have to understand what's going on there. If you develop your way of thinking, you understand the other person's needs, and there the magic is finding what Aristotle calls in his Nicomachean Ethics the measure, which is within a specific context how I can respond in order to cover my needs, but without overstepping on the other. Because we are with others, whatever we do in our professional environment, in our family, our friends, we are constantly with others. Everybody's trying to cover their needs and meet their needs. So what he says is, in this interaction, you have to find a sense of measure that is beneficial to you, but also to others. There's something we don't do, however, and that's why we end up having these problems. We don't take the time during our daily reality and our daily experiences to sit and think of all those things we do habitually, automatically, without thinking. Because usually the problem arises there. We do a lot of things out of habit, or something happens and we think, best, to let it go. It's not the right time to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think right now. I want to escape my problems. So we push it, as I say, under the carpet, instead of exploring, interpreting, understanding, finding the meaning of everything you do. Because again, as Aristotle says, we learn by doing something repeatedly. So if we want to change, we have to understand where it's coming from, and then, if you like, track our steps in our everyday, so we can understand ourselves and prevent problems from arising.
Okay. I want to see if I got this right, this whole process that we're doing right now. So First of all, when we say change, we don't mean to try become something other than yourself and to negate
No.
characteristics.
In fact, if you real change, instead of trying to be someone you're not, if you want to change in the way that we talk about change, is best if you try and be like yourself.
Yeah.
Because we are not ourselves. We adopt and we respond to expectations, and we are not ourselves. So if you really want change in the terms that we talk about change, is instead of becoming something you're not, be yourself.
Be yourself.
But that's a lot more difficult for many people.
Yeah. And that is what you would refer to as personal development. And
Yes.
developing your
Yes.
innate qualities and characteristics.
Yes.
Which then you said is about understanding who you are through the experience of living.
Yes.
And with that, you get to experiment with what Aristotle called mesodta, and finding measure. And measure is all about also your habits, you were saying. So would you...
basically learning involves, as he says, you learn by doing something multiple times. You don't learn just by talking about it unless you practice it and it becomes a habit, which is ethics. If it becomes a habit, then you say you've learned. Now, what we do is we develop habits without actually thinking about these habits. How did they come about? What do they mean? What do they offer? Do I cover my needs through those habits? And then unexamined habits lead to problems.
I also want to put a little asterisk, because when you say habits, you don't mean your habit of eating and your habit of exercising and your habit of work and personal time. You mean habits of behavior, habits of response,
of how you react,
reaction.
of how you respond. And it's not, we always think the difference between Aristotelean philosophy and contemporary perspectives. Contemporary perspectives start, if this is me, they start from whatever is outward.
Yeah.
So they take how I speak, how I behave, what I say, how I felt, and how I felt, it's something that is experienced through what happens to me, basically, right? Now, the Aristotelian perspective starts from here inward, because unless you understand what's going on inside, basically, your head, how you interpret things, how you develop those habits, how you respond, and why, it's how and why. How do I do this and why do I do this? How do I do this and why do I do this? You cannot develop. It's not a matter of change. You cannot develop, because development is, what does development mean? Development means that there is a base, something, right? That is recognizable. You define it somehow. And then this evolves into something. We say this beautiful plant, it used to be this small when it was planted, and look how it developed. It developed into something not other than itself. We don't see half of it this way, the other half another way, and the other half, it develops, right?
Whereas change is like switching out the base.
Yeah. Changes, it can't be done. If it is done, it is done superficially. And I think that's why a lot of people suffer, because there's nothing worse than having this contradiction of a self, a facade that you put, a superficial thing of yourself. So you control your behavior. It's not a matter of controlling your behavior. It's a matter of knowing how to behave in different situations. Regulate your emotions. How can you rate? It's not a market. How do you regulate? You regulate, you control. These are so materialistic terms that they have nothing to do with understanding what's going on in your head, basically, because everything goes through your head, how you interpret things and what they mean. Because the most important, why do we do all these? I mean, why do you want to develop? what is the benefit of the development?
Happiness.
Yeah, but to get there, there's a step. You see, we always go to the end, but we have to go to the how this happens. When you become, awareness is one thing, understanding is another. Understanding is understanding the cause of things. Awareness doesn't necessarily mean I understand where something is coming from. And we are all about understanding the cause of things. When you understand who you are, your personality, and you develop, that means that you can give yourself direction. You choose what situations you want to find yourself in, what people, how you can cover your needs, the sort of people you want to be with, the sort of people you want to relate, how you want to relate. Because avoid things, you engage in things, you enjoy things. There are so many choices. There's so many things you can do with who you are once you know. So you give direction and you make choices that are wise, beneficial to you, instead of having problems. Is there something else you want to? Shall we give another?
I feel like you kind of said it all, unless you feel like something is incomplete.
Yeah, I know that when we start talking about things that pertain to thinking, and that you have to examine, and you have to look at, and you have to interpret, you have to do all these things that are not very tangible, and they are not quick. Now, how can I resolve? This is how can I resolve it? What can I do? I know it seems distant and not very helpful, but it is in terms of how you set your goals, what it is that you want to resolve, and then it's not that difficult if you break down your experiences, because examining, as we say, your experiences, where everything starts, because that's where you see yourself. It's not that difficult. All you have to do, of course, you have to learn to ask questions, and we'll have another podcast about the type of questions you can make. But all you have to do is sit down and, write down your experience, and it doesn't have to be detailed, or just write down in phrases or even words. You start from what happened, then you can say how I felt, and then start asking, very simple, what does that mean? I felt sad. What does that mean? I felt sad, meaning I felt disappointed. Somebody made me feel like I have no value. I felt disappointed because I was more scared, disappointed with myself. Somebody else disappointed, or did I disappoint myself? And then ask why. Why? What do I mean and why? What does this mean and why? It's very simple. The actual questions are very simple. And if you do them as simply as this, you will be impressed with what information you get. Because we have information every single moment of the day. We just discard it. We don't look at it.
I remember the very first time you brought up the word thinking and the phrase way of thinking, and that you wanted to emphasize and focus on thinking. It felt to me a little bit dry just as a word, because it's so epistemic sometimes. But now, through all of our conversations and through all of our experiences and the programs that we're running and doing, I've come to realize that thinking is quite literally the spring of life. Like, it is a very animated experience. Yeah. So it's not this dry textbook.
No. And I hope through these podcasts and our seminars to show people that it's not as sophisticated as they think, and also you're a lot more sophisticated than you give credit for, to yourself. It's not there's a myth about what is sophisticated in psychology and Aristotle and blah blah. But when we think of change, yes, we can develop. Yes, we can evolve. Yes, we can use our characteristics to cover our needs as long as we learn how to use them across situations. And the benefit, except from when you evolve, you give direction to your life, but there is no, how can I say, you don't have to be anxious about the finishing line.
Right.
It's not that,
you have to become something.
You have to become something.
You simply are.
You simply are. You are simply are, and the point is that you enjoy who you are and you enjoy your living. That's the end goal. The end goal is being happy. So how do I get happy? Because I don't want to be happy for a brief period of time. I want to experience life in happiness, having a peace of mind. So that's the beauty of evolving instead of, I don't know, adopting something strategy, something else to change.
And that is why we say, better your way of thinking to better your way of living.
Exactly.
The end.
The end.